So we go from there to, prayer, and there's a good section on prayer about the passion that we must engage in. We must have an enthusiasm for the prayer. It can't be empty. There's several schools of thought that really say, you should really pray until you are crying, until you really just emotionally exhausted yourself in the process of prayer. And it's not just, it's a prayer of devotion, of sincerity. It has to really be from the heart. Okay?
That speaks to your earlier point about feeling in meditation.
Right.
Getting that real deep sensation, praying throughout your whole sensorium.
Right, and there's also the function too. It's working through the psychic knots, which have to do with the muscles and the nervous system too, that they get, broken through too, because there's nothing to hold on to anymore. It's literally exhausted.
Which I think is a point that people don't realize about prayer in our society. They think of it as just this antiquated, monotheistic sort of, outdated practice, but it's energy work.
Very well, yeah, it is very much so. Very much so, because if you're not, it's just an idea. With this, Rigardi talks about the importance of finding a symbol of devotion, something which you can really inflame yourself with. He uses the letter Shin, which is great. Has a lot of symbolism in our work. I encourage it for so many different reasons. More than we have time to go into, but it's really just a wonderful symbol. But even if it's not that, you have to find something that inspires you. And inspiration means you sat to the in-breath of God. What is that inspires you to do this work, to move forward, to be useful to yourself, to improve yourself, to be helpful to others, and undertake this work? What is the inspiration? And that's where we look at the symbolism of prayer. So it's something that really inflames us, impassions us, encourages us, makes us want to do it. It can't just be a burden. And there are times when it is a burden. The purpose of this last year's work for some of you was to make it a burden. Good job. It sucked. Oh man, every 3 days, whatever it is, oh geez. 5 days. Yeah, you're always looking, where am I now? Well, I got to get that other one done. Oh man, when's this going to be over with? And what that does is that forces you to break your inherent laziness, your inherent inertia is broken. And it can be that practice, it can be any practice. I mean, the mind is capable of creating, an infinite number of practices to break its laziness, just as it's capable of creating an infinite number of practices to reinforce it. Whatever. It's the beauty of our mind. It's infinitely creative.
What spurred me on several times is whatever the angel was ruling. That happened in my life.
Yeah, whatever.
And it was just like, oh, okay, I gotta continue because it reinforces itself to push you on. So it's not like, it gives you the boost to get through.
Well, actually, just doing the seal or whatever, you get lost in it. I actually enjoyed that part of it.
Oh, yeah, that's the fun
It's just
part.
like,
Yeah, that was the fun part.
what's the next 5 days going to bring me?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's right.
2 hours just fine. Not bad.
Well, I'd love to do a section. I'd love to do it in a more condensed practice with you guys using the planetary hierarchy. Maybe later in the fall or something. That's even easier, but it's equally, wow. Your inherent unconscious habituated patterns just whack you instantly. And the beauty is, even when you really realize, you know for certain when you've broken through. And that's the beauty of it. Wow, I've broken through. At least I've made a hole in the wall. Okay, and that's the good part of it. But it's for something so simple. It's really like you're pounding your head off the wall for the first few weeks to build the momentum of the new habit pattern, to pay attention to this. Because remember, enlightenment is to be awake, to be filled with light. It's to be awake. To be awake is to be aware. You're talking about situational awareness. What are you aware of? What are we aware of? What is going on around us? What are we aware of? And that's here. It's not so much what's going on around us, but what's going on within us. Because what's going on around me is a reflection of what's going on within me. You know? Yeah. I was what's going on inside. And these practices help us become aware of what's going on inside. You know. And by doing that, we become more responsible. Because we realize, but you see, we realize the world may not be the way we want it to be. What's the greatest problem now? You know, texting and telephones, people, you know, having accidents because they're not paying attention. They're not aware, they're not awake. You know.
We were driving down, we saw, first time, you know, I've seen this on the sign, this the text area.
Yeah.
It used to be just rest area.
Rest
now
area,
it's
text.
Text
Yeah.
area.
Well, and to see, I know.
They asked the Navy SEAL.
I saw the interview, and the interview was fantastic because I had that conversation with some of my college students. In fact, I had a wonderfully politically incorrect conversation with the girl. I told her, I said, well, that's a wonderful shirt, and you're free to wear it as long as you stay on campus with it, because if you were to wander off campus and wear that about 3 blocks up the road, you'd essentially be asking to be a victim of sexual assault, you know.
What did it say?
And they'd say, well, what do you mean? I said, well, first of all, you don't understand the neighborhood. I said, right where you're at, it's very safe to be dressed that way. You look very nice, and it's great for a party. 3 blocks that way is a very different world. And because you're not from here, you don't know that you crossed an invisible boundary. Now, that doesn't mean that, you know, that anything can happen to you with, you know, that you're saying it's okay. But what you're saying is you've moved into other people's terrain, and they don't have the same values as you do. And that's what the SEAL was talking about. He's saying, you know, these people who text all the time, they're walking down and they're asking to be mugged.
Yeah.
In New York, they tell you, in New York, the way you avoid being prey in New York, don't make eye contact and be walking in a purposeful manner.
Yeah, you got to show that you're aware of what's going on. And this is the fact. What we have to do is we have to show that we're aware of what's going on within us. We have to show, and we do that by reflecting within, and then we see it reflected in the world without. You know, by my being aware of what's going on within, I can see what's going on in the world without and say, well, do I want to participate in that or not? Or if I do want to participate on it, in what way? What way? Well, you see, because it's not black and white. The fact is, when we talk about these things, it's all so simple. But the reality is, when we leave here and we go into our daily lives, it gets a very gray zone very quickly. And that's where we have to learn to pay attention within. Pay attention within. And that's what the silence is about, learning to pay attention to the voice within. But how do we can't shut down the voice, the noise. We have to learn to listen through it. And that's what meditation helps us do. We listen through the noise. We don't let it drown us out. We don't let it stop our perseverance. We sit. Okay. This will pass. This too shall pass. And it can be very difficult. But by sitting every day and working every day, eventually you will make progress and it will pass. But you know, we do this too with ritual. One of the rituals described in the 12 steps is the Rose Cross ritual. It's one of my favorites. It's just a wonderful ritual. And what it does is it creates a very nice environment in which to do meditation. And those of you familiar with it, I encourage you to spend some time with it, particularly on a Sunday, because of its nature is akin to that, is very much attuned to those energies. But it's a very mystical ritual. That is, its setting is to allow you to open up and awaken. It's not about moving energy around. It's not about purification. It's about just opening up. And that's why it's often encouraged to do before bedtime for those of you doing dream work. Okay? Now, even if you don't do the full blown out version that is very common in other books, like with all the signs and gestures, just a simple version, excuse me, with the simple prayers that are given in the 1-year manual is very good. Okay? You don't have to do the whole LVX, look signs, and EAO and all that. The version he gives with the prayers is sufficient. In fact, the prayers in here are very, very good. What?
That's good to know.
Yeah.
Yeah, the other version kind of was a bit of a... just kind of...
It's too much.
Prevented me from really getting into it.
And then you're doing the Enochian and all that.
Yeah.
You skip all, you can do with what he has in here. Now, he also gives an introduction to the middle pillar. And that introduction is very bare bones. No colors, very few names. There is circulation of the light, which is very important, but it's minimalistic. And it's just because he wants to get you an experience with it rather than get you into it. And of course, at the end of it is the practicing of the presence of God and recognizing that all is God. And this is what we're talking about here, right? We said what? Practice the presence of God. What does that mean? Nature, the law. Well, we talked about God, because I don't even like to use the word God. I don't. Because what do I mean by that? You know, so I say things like cosmos or nature, because those are in the old manuscripts. But even that I don't like. What is that? And this is where we use what is called the Rosicrucian Trinity from the 16th and 17th centuries. Light, life, and love. Those are things we can identify with. I can build on them. You know, if I'm visualizing light, well, then I'm there. Well, I'm not all there because what about the life? Okay, I'm feeling the life energy, aware, awake, expansive. Excuse me, well, what about the love? The compassion, the joy, the bliss, the happiness. Okay, there too. Well, I got that, but I lost the other one. That's okay. You're working with them. You're working with these ideas. The more you work with them, the more natural they'll come, and that's okay. Practice that everywhere, with everything, with everyone. It would be very hard. That's the point. If it were easy, we wouldn't be here. It wouldn't be called the great work. But you can do it. And I said, think of God in the presence of your fingernail. You know, think of that. Think of that in the root of the hair of your head. The lint in my navel. That's right. There is God. I know it's tough, man, but it's true. You know it's true. It's true. I'll knit you a sweater out of it. That or a hair shirt. That's what. But that's the kind of stuff we're talking about. We have to begin looking to stretch our boundaries. Remember what I read to you earlier from the Corpus Hermeticum? Were you all here for that? Remember, think of all these things. Don't be narrow and limited in what you think of as you're possible of doing and what is God. You know, God is there. It says God is the most prolific and creative thing there is. God is not mind. Mind, I see mind when there's mind. That's God, all this creativity. The plethora, as the Gnostics called it. Constantly outpouring of stuff. You know, we think too statically. We have to think more actively in this regard. Now, those of you who read The Art of True Healing, and I encourage you to get a copy of it. You can get a download, by the way. It's out of copyright, although there are some nice hardcover, small hardcover reprints that are out there. You can get them. They're usually inexpensive, and they're carried around with you, but you can get it. He deals with the elemental energies according to the tree, and it's also in my book on Kabbalah. Okay, so you have it all in there. He then moved on to the middle pillar, and the middle pillar was written a few years later, I think in 1938. And this is really, even though he was somewhat, he had felt by the 60s that his work, the middle pillar, had become outdated. I thought it was pretty interesting because I don't think it's been touched, really, in terms of what was written. I mean, I wouldn't say it's a perfect book by any stretch, but it's certainly not one that I think that I could make much improvement on. I could write commentary, that would add value. And I think Chick and Sandra Cicero tried that with their version. Mm-hmm. I haven't read theirs in a long time, so I don't know really what they talk about in it. But as a book, it has really withstood the test of time. So I would encourage you can get, used copies. Used copies of it. Or you can get, you can download the original 38 edition. Or you might be able to find one. You might be able to find one, online or something, if you care to. What's fascinating about this work, and I have to go over it again in depth because I have to give a presentation on the middle pillar at the Association for the Study of Esotericism in June, up in Colgate. Excuse me. Is he spends a lot of time dealing with the middle pillar in terms of psychology, in terms of saying, this relates to the Freudian or the Jungian notion of fill in the blank. So it's very helpful in understanding how do these energies affect us and relate to us in terms of psychology. Because the good news was he was actually a trained therapist, so he could make these statements with authority and with experience in the method. And he talks about something very important in the book is that the problems, he hints at the pathologies that can occur in people doing magical operations, which is, of course, the big thing that we see all the time. He's warning us, and yet why do we see it so much? And it's because of failure to pay attention to the warning signs and take heed. I personally believe that the reason you see so much egotism, a sense of self-importance is really what it is, hyper self-inflation in these circles, is because the lack of tradition, lack of having a teacher that you trust who's going to hold your nose to it and say, this is what it smells like when it stinks.
And you'll do that for us.
And by the way, that's yours that made that stinky. Now, it's not ice cream, it's stinky. And that's okay as long as we don't confuse the two, And that's my view. It's okay as long as we don't confuse the two. Because, we all go through these problems. Fortunately, you either have some friends who can help you pull your head out of your Muladhara chakra, or you don't. And if you don't, you're in trouble. And a lot of people don't. And that's where the fallacy of the solo practitioner comes in. And we're going to talk about that because people are saying, what do I do? These groups are screwed up and I want to work on my own. We're in a small group. How do I do that? And that's what we're going to try and talk about here today. But one of the things he says is also, my thing is the big reason is pride. The pride is exacerbated through lack of compassion. Pride is always putting oneself before others and putting others down. Pride is a lack of humility. And it doesn't mean it's self-flagellating. I gave a great presentation at the Masonic Academy. I got to tell you, I surprised myself. But that's the humble part. I surprised myself, But what it takes, though, is not just me giving a great presentation. It takes the audience. It takes the dynamic. It takes the whole setup. You see, as a performer what I'm talking about.
It's the moment.
It's a package.
Yeah.
It's a package.
There's almost like sometimes what in the Indian system they call like a Shakti pot.
Yeah.
There's an energy transmission.
There is.
It's reciprocal.
It has, and you as the performer have to build it and have to manage it. But if you have nothing to manage, you've got nothing to manage.
Yeah, exactly.
And you've all been there, and oh man, I want this all.
And then you get drained.
Right.
Your energy output doesn't come back.
Everybody should be feeding each other.
Right.
Helping each other out.
Well, I was at a presentation in this very building a while ago, and excuse me. And so I've been at these myself, where the person, okay, well, we're done, because it's over. It's just not happening, and you know it. But that's the thing, it's being okay. I tried, they tried, it didn't happen. It's okay. A lot of forces at work here. See, but the way you get around that is by compassion, and compassion is not bleeding heart syndrome. It's genuinely helping others. And knowing what is to help. And that's where wisdom comes in. Wisdom is actually knowing what to do and when to do it, and what the results will be. Or at least having confidence that the results will be good. Wisdom is not my giving $5 to the beggar on the street corner who I know is going to spend that on alcohol. That's not wisdom, that's not compassion. Oh, well, it is. I may feel good about myself, but I didn't do this guy any good. Now, when I told him where the center was for the night, or gave him a lift to it, that was doing some good. It's because you have to know what is the effect of your action. People aren't always honest when they come to you. You have to be able to read what is really going on. What do people really need? And you can only know that if you can listen to yourself and know what you really need. And listen to, be honest, be open. What does the situation really require? Not what do I think it requires, or what does my philosophical vision, which may or may not fit the situation, tell me that it requires. And, so we have to look at that. So the way to do that is to really develop a sense of compassion. What am I doing for others today, and how am I being wise in my action? Is it a really helpful action? What am I doing for others? And often not even looking for credit for it too, if possible. That's if possible. Sometimes you have to, otherwise, and even that can be done in a skillful way, so that it encourages others to do things. I had a friend, we're always fundraising. Well, why? Because it encourages others to do it. I know he's going to do it. He knows I'm going to do it. That's not a big deal. What we want to do is we want to encourage others to help out. So that's, you have to look at what are you doing and how you're doing it skillfully. So these psychological disturbances will arise, and that's okay. You just have to learn to deal with them, or have a way to deal with them, or someone who can help you with it. Regarding is also very clear in the book about, and it's interesting because he gives the middle pillar before he gives the lesser ritual of the pentagram, is that you should be spending time with the lesser ritual of the pentagram to prepare your mind and your environment for the work of the middle pillar prior to undertaking the middle pillar. So he kind of puts the cart before the horse in the book. But it's important because of the way he wants to go. Now, with that being said, with that being said, he states that the nature of any magical ritual should be thoroughly understood. Now, thoroughly, some people get too hung up on that. What does thoroughly mean? Well, you're never going to understand each and every detail of it because there's always something new to fish out of it. But that when you're doing a ritual, you should at least have an idea as to what you're doing. What does this action mean? What does this word mean? Why have I picked this color? If I've got 3 or 4 color choices for, say, the star, the pentagram, like Earth. Earth, you could use forest green, bright green, kind of a rusty red, or you could use black. Okay, why do I use that one? You have to know. Because say maybe you change it at some other point, you need to know why did you change it. See, there's nothing arbitrary about a ritual. Because a ritual is a combining of symbols. Symbols are words, and rituals are paragraphs. Okay? A symbol is a word, but a ritual is a paragraph made of symbols. And a paragraph is designed to tell you something. And the ritual is designed to pull out of you or evoke an experience. So you need to have at least an idea.
But it has to affect you viscerally, I guess.
In some ways.
It generates some sort of connection or...
Generally it does. Yeah, generally it does, particularly in the beginning, when that beginner's luck syndrome kicks in a lot. But that's still, you have to, you have to do that, have some kind of response. Oh, this is good. And people can do rituals without really understanding them and still get a result because they have complete confidence. The emotional charge is so high that it's just going to overwhelm it. That's possible. That happens a lot. But we're not concerned with that. We're concerned with an understanding so that we can grow and mature as human beings. So do the middle pillar. You do the lesser ritual, the pentagram, for anywhere from 1 to 3 months, maybe 6, depending on what's going on, your level of experience. And then you begin to do the middle pillar. And I say do the middle pillar with the elements first, and then do the middle pillar based on building the tree of life. Because the elements are going to be most practical to you in a day-to-day existence. Personally, I think that building the tree of life more than once a week is too much. And I say that only because we experience life through the elements. The tree becomes this giant abstraction that we get lost in. even though all these things are within us, you know. Use the tree more as a map, because we've got all this great stuff we can do with the planetary energies and circulating them and all sorts of other stuff for talismans and things, to get too hung up on the tree. What happens, I find, is people who do the tree, they build the full tree too much, and they actually make it too concrete. They don't understand that it's not that way, that it's not concrete like that. You know, these are very fluid ideas that you kind of move into. And then they're there, and they're very real. But then you move into another one, like the paths. The paths aren't fixed. There are different versions of the tree where the paths go in different ways, because the paths represent relationships between the energies, the spheres. They're called the paths of wisdom because, in fact, early on you didn't even get the paths. You just meditated on the spheres, and then awarenesses would pop up. Wisdom, intuitive insight, clairvoyance, get it? That's what we mean by wisdom. The pure knowing, the pure awakening, a direct perception. It's not fuzzy. And then that path, you would understand there's a relationship here. Okay? Now, with that, you know, what we call that is what the subjective synthesis, as Leshevsky calls it. I called it the subconscious synthesis. But it's the same thing, just understanding what you're doing and being confident in it, that this is okay. Some other guy may be doing another way, that's okay. There's no one true way. There are some ways that are far more effective than others, but you just have to know, this is what I'm doing it for this reason. And you have to have faith in it. Faith is the key. Now, in his other work, he talked about something called, oh, by the way, when Regardi wrote the middle pillar, what made it different from the Art of True Healing is this book. He was deeply influenced by The Secrets of the Golden Flower, which was translated by Richard Wilhelm and commentary by C.J. Jung. And this is a book on Taoist alchemy. And he was very, very influenced by it. Okay? That's where you get the circulations of light and all of that didn't exist prior. Yeah. Because if you get it moving, you don't get the problems. If it's static, you get the problems. And if you get it moving, it moves on its own. So you got to get the motion going. Yeah. Just keep pulling it by the nose. Yeah. So this is kind of an important book to look at in relationship to the middle pillar. Personally, you guys can ask Brian about this. I've talked to him a little bit about it, is this one. This is the only book that has actually, I've read, that has actually mentioned the experiences that I've had. Okay? And it is not easy to read because he teaches it in a traditional style.
It's hardcore.
So you have to read it, you have to take notes, and then you have to go back and reconstruct everything you just read. You can't read it straight through. Well, you can, but it's question and answer. So you have to actually pay attention. And that's the traditional way of teaching. That's why I said to you, I'm not going to hand you a list of saying step 1, step 2, step 3.
How would you compare them to late Johnson?
Well, the only thing I can say is most people that I've talked to about Mantak Chia have said that it's effective in that it's going to work, but that he's full of crap. At the end of the day, I mean, you're going to get the buzz and you're going to move stuff and stuff is going to happen. But at the end of the day, you know, that it's not what they were saying was the real thing.
Because he takes from here, he takes from there, he takes from there, he takes from there.
Right, and there's reasons for that. I mean, that's often how a lot of traditions survived, is they were falling into pieces. Someone had to collate all those pieces back into a working system. So I don't have a problem with that. The question is, as some people have pointed out to me, I do not know enough to be an authority either way on it, but they have said that school in particular was notorious for lying. Notorious for telling you half-truths. And
Did they do that just to keep their stuff secret? Or
just to screw with you.
Just,
Well, the Chinese are notorious liars.
yeah,
I mean, it's just, the Chinese esotericism is nasty.
the same way in business.
Yeah. It's just horrible. People say, oh, you see that, because it's true. And I know who's dealt with them. They've all told me the same thing. I'm telling you this from experience.
I'm
Some of it's
saying
for
that you
people.
need to sell your basketball team.
Yeah. Maybe some good, because I don't have a basketball team. They all tell me the same thing. Look, if you don't know this, if you don't know, they will not tell.
Yeah.
So if you don't even have
teach
the,
you if you're not Chinese.
And-
Not the real secrets.
and then there's a lot of that I've been told too.
And also, Mantak system, there's a lot of well-maintained websites out there that basically detail why it's dangerous.
That's the other thing I've told. I have not read those yet,
Yeah.
but I've been told, and Brian mentioned this to me, he said that there were some things in there that really you could pop a cork on.
Yeah, real
Oh, no,
dangerous.
he said, I've like heard a lot of students, right,
Out to
insane.
out to La La Land, and then there's physical dangers involved too. There are a couple guys doing a Chinese weightlifting,
Yeah.
With the,
Yeah.
yeah, that's a little crazy.
Yeah, so at the end of the day is, to answer your question, this is the only fellow I've been told, no one has ever said anything bad about it. In fact, they've called it the only book that actually tells you everything. But again, it's like Agrippa. Agrippa says at the end of the book, we've told you everything, but not in order. You have to actually go back and then figure out where it belongs. And this one is the same way. Yeah. But it's doable. You have to understand it is doable. And the doable is through the practice. See, what they'll do is there'll be enough practice to get started, and then there'll be stuff. So if you're actually, and the alchemists are notorious for this too in the
I
manuscripts.
guess they wanted you to do the extra work, the processing, so that
Exactly.
So
they
as you
didn't
do
want
it-
the fringe people to find the book.
Exactly. Exactly, that's it.
So as you do it, it shows itself to you, more or less.
Well, that's true, particularly with the middle pillar too. As you do the middle pillar, if you do it properly, as I've described it, especially with the details that I've outlined for you, that are not in the other stuff, but the particular details I've given you, you'll find it'll be self-revelatory. Okay? Things will naturally unfold, and you'll know where to go. Now, the other book I really encourage you to read, and this is fantastic, is The Tree of Life, A Study in Magic. There's actually techniques buried in here if you pay attention. Okay? Some good stuff. But the reason I suggest you read it is because he really does give a clear overview of magic, particularly the similarities and differences between medieval and modern magic. Most don't do that. He goes and shows you very nicely what the differences are. He also gives you a solid introduction to the Abramelin operation, sufficient enough that if you're a dedicated student, you can actually perform the operation from there, because the operation is essentially an extended devotional retreat. That's really what it is if you're paying attention. Okay? He gives you a very good view of Solomonic magic, a good background so that you can begin to understand what's going on, should you want to go down that path. And of course, he gives a good overview of the Lesser Banishing Ritual of the Pentagram, but it's slightly different from the other versions that you've come across. Pay attention there. I prefer the version in here. This is the version I use, where it states, for about me flames the pentagram, in the middle of the column or the middle of the pillar shines the six-rayed star, because that's right here, and that's the heart. Instead of above me shines the six-rayed star. Instead of it being above me, it's in me. Okay? Instead of before me or behind me. But it's with, yeah, and that's the way I told him. Okay, and that's the way to do it, because that's the solid, that way you internalize it. See, what we're doing, again, at this level, we want to internalize as much of the ideas as possible, rather than having them always being something other. Okay? Do you understand?
Can I just ask you a quick question?
Yes.
You referred to this Eloha Vada'at, or just the short version?
I use the long version. For me, Iao is really a very general, powerful name, from the Gnostics. So I'll use Iao for, in the same way Tibetans would use Om Ahom. Okay? Iao is really a statement of the creative demiurgic power. Okay? So I use that. So I use Aloha
Brian
Vahada.
taught us one way, then he decided to change it. Maybe that's after talking to you.
Rigardi did that. Rigardi changed. He said Aloha Vahada. Vada was too long. Use Iao. Any Yao is acceptable, but it's not. I don't agree with him on that. Simply because it has a within the broader context of teachings, it's really it would be the same as Yote Valpe. Okay, that's really what you're with. Yao is really invoking Yote Valpe. Because that's in theory what the vowels plug in.
Right.
Okay. So for me, that's how I keep it. Also, you want to be careful. I mean, even though the names can have different uses, because they're all divine names, by the way. Not one is more enlightened than the other. They're all divine names. Yeah, and they're all gonna get you to because see, the people think you actually have to climb the tree. You don't. You can actually each sphere has a dense, more subtle, and archetypal power. So you could actually. That's why there's different paths to enlightenment. Someone can find enlightenment through any one of those paths, without actually saying, "I climbed the tree." That's again, we're making it concrete. It's not concrete.
That's a three-dimensional.
Yeah.
It feels good to.
It makes it because it relates to our world that we live in.
That's right. Yeah, but really, you can find the light, if you will, the illumination. Of again, to use this metaphor of cooking or of chocolate or of music, because they both relate to Netzach, or gardening even. So each of those will allow you a deeper and deeper perception of the nature of yourself and reality, if done with the right mindset, until you come to an aha moment, that awakening aha moment. The same thing with, say, a hood. Would it be mathematics, or whether it be schematic drawings or magic or writing, or words? They can allow you that deeper and deeper perception and thought, aha. But that's because you're working through the four levels, not thinking you're going this way. You're never going this way. That's just a diagram that we use to try and explain stuff.
So each sphere could have like a tree in it.
Each sphere does have a tree in it. And when we say it has a tree, what we're saying is it has subtle aspects within it.
Okay.
That's what we're saying. It has
the micro to the macro.
right. It has aspects of the whole within it that we interact with.
And you can put the tree, superimpose it on you,
Right.
and go from there.
And that's what we want to talk about is, always start with the elements first and work with the elements, and then say once a week or twice a week if you want, do the whole tree, build the whole tree in your aura, because that's your map. But you want to be careful there, because it's if you can penetrate into them and make it physical or dense, that's good. But otherwise, you want to just work with, again, when we build this on the aura, like I said earlier, that paragraph, sanctifying your limbs is what you're doing. And you're actually creating locations, the psychic centers of these are the energies, okay, that locate or equate to these parts of the body.
One thing I found was I go running in the woods. I find I observe that ritual when I'm deep in the woods, and I do it because nature's grounding me.
Right. Yeah.
Because when I'm doing it in the home, for some reason,
it's not the same. It's not going to be, and you have to, and that's where it's not going to be the same. I'm sorry. These are the elements of nature. We need to get as close to raw nature as we can to do this, to get the most bang, to shake off our habituated patterns, to shake off we need that energy to kick us in the behind, to kick us in the head so that we can wake up.
Plus the Malkuth being connected is best there, because in the house, sometimes you're on the second floor.
It's very different, especially if you're barefoot. You're doing barefoot outside. Like German folk magic, traditional German folk magic was to walk outside in April, May. Right. And you collected your water at that time,
I was
too.
reading an article about, I've been reading a lot about EMFs lately. And they were saying that walking in barefoot outside, you have to choose carefully on what earth you're walking on, because if you're still in a heavy traffic area of transmission, those transmissions permeate the ground. So you really have to be in a remote area to get that full grounding effect. I kind of agree with that philosophy.
Right, and it's harder to do that, though.
You get Tesla, but
It's difficult.
It's harder to get that remote. So you got to make a decision. Is there a way I can either get that contact and overrule that, just struggle with the reality of the ground in front of me?
Yeah.
I mean, that's what we're doing in Matt. We're constantly saying, what is the field before me?
Yeah.
Check the field of work. What is before me? That's it. In some ways, I have to say, life is a battleground. We don't like looking at it that way, but you're constantly faced with these choices and struggles and decisions, and it's never perfect.
Isn't that Pat Benatar?
Yeah, well, that's lovely. Yeah. I'm sure she had to struggle. Yeah. That's right, Pat. No, that was
That's a different one.
a different one. Who was that? Yeah, I remember watching her on, I don't know, it was like some kind of New York Channel 9 telethon before she was big.
Really?
Yeah, I didn't watch for long. I was changing the channel. I don't know. So, it really is that struggle, and we have to overcome that by learning not to struggle, by learning to know what is the battle that we can fight and win, what can we sidestep, and how to, deal with what we've got.
I think that's what this last year taught me a lot.
Yeah.
Well,
It's like how to submit.
what confronts us is what's inside of us. So as we work on what's inside of us, less stuff confronts us.
No, I don't. I think it makes it just easier to deal with. We don't struggle as much.
Well,
You don't get as neurotic.
well, because you're not as neurotic inside.
Yeah, you're not as concerned. Okay, stuff happens. Stuff happens. We deal with it. Remember that the notion here again within we talk about the Holy Spirit, and the Holy Spirit is a really interesting term because it comes to us again from the Babylonian period, and it's from the Zendavestia, which is actually the Indo-Iranian period, and then it comes into Judaism and into Christianity, and in the Zendavesta, the Holy Spirit really meant creative spirit, the holy creative energy. So that's just another word for the energies of life. The energies of life. And they're associated with the presence of God, Shekinah, that, in the temple, that this was a tangible presence. This is real. This was something real. It was right there. Because those forces of life can be very, very real, and concentrated. Not just in us, but in this, what we would think of as supernatural or mystical way phenomena. And that's how really occult operations take place, is through that energy, through the manipulate. Everything is a manipulation of that energy of the Mercury.
How does the chi energy relate to the Holy Spirit? Is it the
Same thing. I see it as the same
I think
thing.
it's the same thing.
Function-wise, description-wise, it's the duck test is what I apply, and I think it matches the duck test. Now, within that being said, let me get a drink and then I'll be back.
Mark, I have a bottle of water in my car.
Yeah, no, you have to really get away from the transmission line, just like. No, I know.
Goes back to the 1950s, the Russians proved that high tension, they can actually take a fluorescent tube, stand under a high tension,
I know.
and be able to light up. And Russians were saying this in the 50s, we learned from them,
Yeah, just to add something to that point, like when I was a kid and I grew up in the woods, I
the
walked
side
there
effects of these
learned
are,
more
you never have children.
didn't know that what but my energy was so much more balanced with that.
Oh, I mean,
actually do any kind of external practice.
not to mention,
But you move to the city, you know you're going to become a donor, you don't
See
do that.
concentration,
So you need something else.
Why?
I'm like I live in the garage.
at that point, it's not genetics.
Yeah.
Wow.
no, no,
Yeah, so there's something that
Oh, boy.
endemic.
So it was a 5-hour candle or something? Did you leave it on when we went to lunch?
Even just being here,
Cellular
the
infrastructure.
air quality is so much
And
better.
they'll tell you cell
That I
tower,
just feel
very
like.
high tower up there. I can tell you mathematically, it loses 3 dB per so many.
So would you
feet.
say the Holy Spirit or the key energy is what makes our heart beat?
Free space, free air, free space attenuation.
Well, I would say this is life force. And I think, the life force is just that. One of the things, if you look at what Dion Fortune wrote, And I think it was in her book, Psychic Self-Defense. Yes, it was in there. She mentioned, when you invoke the Father, this is what energy is for initiation or something like that. And thank you. When you invoke the Son, it's for, I think, illumination or something. And then when you invoke the Holy Spirit, it's for, no, the Son was for, purification. And then the Holy Spirit was something like actions, magical actions or something. You could look it up. The point was she was giving different qualities to each of the aspects of the Trinity. And that's why it's important that when you undertake a path, that you stick with the path so you understand what these words mean. Not just on the outer level of, in the name of the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit, which, for most people doesn't have much meaning at all. But even when it's explained, as the Godhead and the creative force and King of the universe and, the Son who we can understand and relate to, who historically walked the earth and did things for the salvation of mankind, and the Holy Spirit, that creative energy that allowed this all to take place, at least in that crude, simple way, it has some meaning. Then you can start saying that's how that's used in sympathetic magic, because the magical operations always refer to a historical premise. In traditional, you say, you who have given the mysteries of blank to so-and-so, just as was done by, I do now. And Jesus says, if you do this in my name. That's very important because we're always making that historical link to energies in the past as a way of building confidence. And it has been done. There is precedence. There is legal precedence in the cosmos for this to occur. Okay?
It's just like that tapping into the morphic field just through a linguistic pattern, pressing the button.
Yeah, well, that's what it's trying to do. But it's psychological. It's saying, hey, because remember, the ancient Egyptians, when they did Assumption of the God form, which was, they assumed the God form of the gods. And this is what I want to talk to you about when you get into this, about God forms. When you do this, it's on the energy level. It's on the body, the level of the energy body, of the psychic body. And this creation of a form, while it doesn't necessarily change you physically, it's how you're perceived in the invisible. That's why when you go to sleep at night, you would take on a perception of a deity or a God form, or not, or maybe a symbol. Some people use symbols because that's how you're perceived. The idea was, in some teachers are very specific about it. It's to keep the the wandering spirits away because that's how they see you. But here, this is how they, but in a culture or in a magical system that doesn't have that assumption of the deity form, you have to you have to borrow the energy. In a way, all magic is borrowed magic, in a way. In one respect. So you borrow it, you're saying in the name of. But what is the name? The name is the word of the sound. Remember, the psychic energy is the word of the sound, the creative powers that go forth. Here's someone that said, esotericism does not require any act of faith, rather it requires goodwill and a free spirit, or a spirit free of a priori assumptions and prejudices. And yet this is precisely where the difficulty lies. Rather, we should try to accept and to operate and to observe with objectivity whatever ensues from the acceptance and from the actions within the inner domain of our being. Thus one's criteria knowledge will be a result and not a starting point. We just, whatever comes up, we accept it. And begin to work with it rather than trying to fit it into pre-existing notions. If the pre-existing notions worked, you wouldn't need to study esotericism. You wouldn't need to do the practices. It's that simple, yet somehow we become stupid. It's habituated patterns. When we talk about the name, the names of God are vibratory powers. They're combinations of the energies. And Yod He Vav He represents the four elements. So that way Yod He Vav He is really the demiurge. It's the Ein Sof Ar, the limitlessness, which is really God. That's what's beyond the spheres. But we almost were trapped within our own duality.
Well, you said it, EIO is that same.
It's the same power, right?
It's the same
And we use that
primordial energy.
Right, we use it to manipulate, to bring things in. But, that name, too, is also, a name is a quality. That's why there was a time when people were very careful about what they named their children. Because, it's a quality. You have your birth name and your baptismal name.
Most
And-
ancient cultures, you never used the name, you used a representation for it, because the name had power and participated the power by constantly using it.
Well, and when we look at people now, we often say, what are your names? Names don't even have any meaning. You just make up these sounds.
Nickname, short.
Or they shorten the names, right? Which is acceptable to some degree, but I always, it's shortening it. Now the names have meaning because it's a combination of energy. So even if the name is a nonsense name, meaning it has no relationship to any actual language or historical or cultural meaning, those nonsense sounds, still have a vibratory quality.
It goes with what you said earlier, that where's that power?
Right. So
It
if
always comes back to that.
well, it does. It comes back to that. So the question then is, if someone has a nonsense name, meaning it has no meaning, no sense, I can't sense it. What is its meaning? Then that carries over to the person. Because they're constantly being asked, well, what does that mean? Well, something, my mother gave me. Okay. Okay.
Zappa.
Yeah.
Weasel.
But at least that has some vague quality. I mean, we can say, okay, Moon Zappa. At least that means you come from hippie money. You come from very wealthy hippie money. That's good for you.
Sold a few of them.
So that being said, pay attention here. Each human being has the task of seeking for the secret name which was entrusted to him at birth and which is needed to make him worthy, to pass the test of death victoriously, to make the name permanent like that of Osiris. The name is an essential component of survival in the kingdom of the dead. Everyone must remember their name. To the gods he states explicitly that this name is a god who dwells in his body. To the eternal stars whom he meets in the skies he declares, I know your names. And that's how you overcome a lot of the obstacles in the psychic domain, is by stating their name, saying, I know your name. And I'm telling you that's very real. Okay?
That's when you work with especially the demons.
Yeah.
You want to know their name.
Yeah. Even the Catholic Church says you must first invoke it, you compel it to reveal its name. Because the name has a vibratory quality. Now, we think of it as a name, like a stamp, which is the most minimal level. But on the other hand, that means that's a link for the manipulation of those energies. When your mother calls your name, you can tell whether you're in trouble or you're getting a cookie.
Or a paddle.
Or a paddle. That's right. And it's the same with everything else. The name is that hook. So, that being said, we have that to go over too.
They also have a numerical value. The name has a numerical value.
Yes, so we can we'll talk about that. The numerology is important, but there's various schools of it. So you have to, again, what's the one that you're going to pick? I find oddly, I'll do a name from different schools, and it'll often come up being the same number, which is kind of fun.
Yeah.
But again, you have to look at the system that you're using and stay with that for the contextual meaning. Okay?
Because everything builds upon that within your own psyche.
That's right. Otherwise, if it has no meaning to you, then
It gets scrambled up and
exactly.
it just sits there, nothing happens.
You can change
Now-
perception by changing value.
Now, within the notion of the other book, Tree of Life, read that. Okay, get a hold of that. But his other work is Ceremonial Magic. This one's not as well known, And this is probably one of the finest books I've read, but it's also very dense. What he does is he takes the ideas that he gave you in the middle pillar, and that wonderful idea that all of you have heard, Dr. Oshevsky talk about so much, that subjective synthesis, pounding out the meaning of the ritual. And he explains to you how that was done in Opening by Watchtower. Now, the Opening by Watchtower ritual is a fabulous ritual because it progressed over time. And he takes you through the different variations of it. Now, I like the really simple variation of the invocation of a bornless one, which he goes through. And that was taken from a Greco-Egyptian papyrus. And amazingly, while that ritual is used for the invocation of the higher self, the initial ritual was really just an exorcism, in which the operator, again, commanded the authority of saying, I am the deity, you will obey. Again, it's the assumption of the God form. He's assuming his divine role, his power within. But the ritual was modified around 1904 or slightly earlier by Crowley, and became later evolved into what we call Opening by Watchtower. I really like it. It's a very nice ritual. It has several variations to it as it evolved. And he takes you through them. And he says, if you're going to do the ritual, you have to understand each and every part of it. Now, again, not completely, but you have to understand what you're doing. What does this mean? Okay? Isn't that the great complaint? I find that amazing. People say, I don't want to go to church anymore because I didn't know what was going on. And then they'll go off and they'll join some magical group or some Buddhist group or some Indian group. And they don't understand what's going on, but they're happy.
Because mom and dad's not telling them
Because mom and dad's not telling them to do it.
It's their choice.
Yeah, now I'm happy. I'm ignorant, but I'm happy because everyone else is ignorantly happy around me.
I
have my peers.
I have my peers. I'm with my
get to
peers.
dance around a fire and make noises.
That's right.
I
Yeah,
went to church way more now.
it's especially.
Every time I go around, I have a blast.
You have a lot more fun. Yeah. Now that said. That said, within the book, he gives, and this is really the core part of the teaching for today. Okay, not only the origins of the bornless ritual as an exercise or an exorcism, but how it was converted into a ritual for knowledge of what they call the holy guardian angel. He takes us through several variations of this ritual, which is critical, because you see how understanding evolves with time. Rituals often aren't fixed, whether we like it or not, okay? And there can be variations of them, but again, I have to know what the pieces mean. It is not, it's a paragraph, These are symbols are words, and rituals are stories. We have to know what the story means. How is the story going to end? Because we're the player in all the parts. I want to make sure it has a good ending. I want this to end well. As he goes through the different levels of subjective synthesis, he also shows us, again, that even if you can't do the ritual completely this way for whatever reason, this is all you need to know to do it. So at the end, we can distill it down to its essence, which is what we constantly need to do with all the work that we do. We have to have a seed. We need to allow the seed to grow into a plant and to flower, which is fairly complex. But then what do we do with that flower or that fruit? We distill off of it its essence. What is the core of it? What is its purpose? What is its function? And we often don't do that. We like to get caught up in these big elaborations. Or we like to skip that growth part and go right to the simple, thinking that, we're too good for that. You have to be able to walk each step of the journey. And that distillation of the essence is critical, because that allows you then to be comfortable in whatever work you're doing. Okay? Want a complex? We got time? Wonderful. We don't, we can only do it this way because of the ritual that way.
And as long as you understand it, that you can go.
Then you can do whatever you want. It's like the Abramelin. It gives you these rituals and it says, well, you know what? Just go build an altar out of stone out in this woods here and do these prayers.
Isn't the point of doing the repetition of rituals, even if you can't do it, you can just lie there and go through the steps and still create that sort of...
If you're good, you can. Most people fall asleep.
Oh,
And also there's the laziness involved that if you can't, legitimately can't, that's okay. But I know a lot of people who will force themselves to do it, just to, complete the function, the dedication, because there's that overcoming the inertia. We are just wonderful creatures. We give ourselves an inch, we take a yard, And that's why this is so difficult to teach, because if we distill things down to the essence for people, then they want it even easier. That's the great joke. Yeah.
Plus, if you thought that, there's another way of doing the Abramelin, deep in the back of your mind, there might be a little seed of doubt which says, maybe meditation
Isn't really needed.
maybe, taking the shortcut's not going to produce results, and already you failed.
So you're already given the simplest methods, and yet at the same time, that's too much. We're already told this is the easiest way to do it. Well, that's still too much. Okay, get it. You're done. Go back to being concerned about what some guy who owns a basketball team did or didn't say, because you're done. And then the cycles are going to come, and you're just food for the gods. And you see, that's a great thing. You get to pick. Well, am I going to be food for the gods, or am I going to be one of them? A hero, a son of Jupiter. Because that's your choices. If you don't want to, fine. Nature doesn't care. I loved my guinea pigs. Nature didn't care. My dog dropped them off at my feet. She thought she was doing the right thing. Nature didn't care. So how is it going to be any different? We can either work on ourselves and be helpful to others. That's the key. I really believe that. And be genuinely helpful to others. Otherwise, I don't think you can go very far. I think it's just like Hinayana Buddhism at that point. You can get free from suffering, your own your own liberation, but you're still going to be stuck in a lot of ways. Okay. Now, with that said, we have to look at what is our reason, what is our purpose, and to help us understand our purposes in groups, or even when we're doing them outside of groups, we have what are called oaths and obligations. Those of you who are Masons or involved in other groups understand what these are. These are verbal and written statements that affirm one's relationship. Remember what we said, love is right relationships. I have to know what is my right relationship to these people. What are the agreed upon clauses? What are the agreed upon rules of what we do? And every group is going to be different. So you have to have an understanding, if you join a group, that what are the oaths and obligations that go with it. And the ones early in the game are often very general, nothing particular that you need to be concerned about. They're very straightforward and simple. And they say, I won't do anything against the laws of my country, or that's immoral or ethical, any of that stuff. Okay, fine. But what am I really saying? And one of the earliest ones that you might take would be similar to the Oath of the Neophyte, which the Golden Dawn uses. I have some other Oaths of the Neophyte from groups that I am in. I've left those at home. This is just because people can easily find this online. It's easier to use. And it's essentially the same essence. Different wording, same idea. I am. See, I am. Me. Like of my own free will and accord. I am willing to take a solemn obligation in the presence of this assembly to uphold the sacred mysteries in the current of light. This assembly. The assembly can be physical, but can also be spiritual as well, and hopefully it's both. Then I understand there's nothing contrary to my blah, blah, blah. And then I, in the presence of the Lord of the universe, who works in silence and whom naught but silence can express, and in this hall of the neophytes, do of my own free will, hereby and hereon most solemnly promise, by on this holy symbol of light. You always have to swear on a holy symbol, right? There's always something. That's why the symbol is important. It has to have meaning to you. If it doesn't have meaning to you, You're either in the wrong group, or you have to be in a group that allows you to pick what is holy. Like in Masonry, you get to pick what is your book of the law, your sacred volume of the sacred text, or sacred law. You get to choose. Okay, so if you don't have that choice, you need to do something different. To dedicate my life to the pursuit of the mysteries and the mysteries of the traditions of magic and the completion of the great work. That's what you're there for. That's why you're in the group to begin with. That's what you're studying. You have to verbally recognize it. Until you verbally stated it, it's often an ambiguous thought. It's not even a thought, it's below the threshold, or you're even afraid to say it.
Committed.
Yeah, you have to commit yourself. Remember the power of the word. In front of witnesses, I'm committing myself to the completion of the great work. And what that means. Persevere with courage and determinations, and as they shall persevere with courage and determination through the ceremony which is in their image, recognizing that the ceremonies are a reflection of the work we do. Okay? I pledge from this day forward to strive with enthusiasm and devotion to the study of the Hermetic arts, seeing that such teachings are not given to those who wish only a cursory knowledge thereof. Oh, how far we have fallen. Okay? So, the idea being, I'm going to study with enthusiasm. Hey, if you're not enthusiastic about it, go find something you are. Because you have to be really devoted to this. It takes a lot of time and energy. I undertake to maintain a kindly and benevolent relation to all true seekers of light, and I will respect all religions, seeking that all faiths contain a ray of truth. Okay, you're trying to say, I'm going to be nice to everybody, because it's not worth time and trouble not to be. And that everyone is seeking the truth in their own way, and I'm going to encourage them as best I can to follow that way. I pledge that I will not suffer myself to be placed in a state of passivity, or that any person or power may have me lose control of my thoughts, words, or actions. Remember, thoughts, words, or actions. Meaning you're not going to let external forces affect you to the point where habits kick in. Okay. I vow that I will not debase my mystical knowledge in the labor of evil at any time. Pretty straightforward, although what is evil? Now you get into the whole bunch of issues that we don't discuss at this time. Sometimes it's hard to tell. But usually we know what it is. It's when you're doing something out of pride or selfishness or injury. Injury is the big one. I promise not to flaunt or parade my knowledge that I may acquire to those who are not seekers of light, lest it be profaned. You don't show off. So people who are out there wearing, 6 tons of silver jewelry around their neck and crystals, really it's for them. They're trying to reinforce themselves. You know who people are. You'll see them. They'll have like a ring or two. And it'll be nice, like Masons. You'll have a ring or two. But you don't want them like looking like, old Soviet generals with all their...
Mr. T.
Their buttons, right? Or Mr. T with their stuff.
I've seen that.
Just the list is so, they look like a North Korean general with all their badges. It's, you want to say, and you don't show off. The goal is not to show off. It's not to hide, but not to show off either. And to who too? Those who are not seekers of light. It won't do them any good. What did I say? To tell someone the truth before their time is lying to them. But it is okay to demonstrate certain things under what we call closed or tiled conditions. That's okay. What?
Just us.
Right. When doors are locked. Yeah. I swear upon this symbol to observe all things without evasion, equivocation, or mental reservation. We know that one, don't we, guys? Furthermore, if I break this magic obligation, I submit myself by my own consent to the punitive stream of power. We're saying I accept the karmic obligations that goes with breaking any of my oaths and obligations. That's it. And that can be tricky. That can be real tricky because I know that there's a couple oaths that I've broken. Okay? And the only reason I did it is because if I didn't, then it was like regarded, the whole thing was in the toilet.
You entered into that obligation freely without any coercion, so you have promised to fulfill that obligation.
Right. And I fulfilled it, and when those in charge failed to fulfill their end, I fulfilled the obligation the best way I could.
Except the life.
No, something else.
Burn their house to death.
That's one of the reasons you have to really think before you take an oath and obligation,
Yeah.
because you are promising something of your own free will and accord.
Right. You have to understand what you're getting into. Most people don't understand the contract. It's a contract. Yeah. It's a contract. You have to understand it. And it's, you know, it is between you and the people, but also you and your inner self, cosmic, God within. It's your own moral law now. So if your moral law is incongruent, your words don't have any meaning, how can your invocations have any meaning? Because you know you're a liar. You know? I mean, many of us, we went back and forth, said, okay, you know, the powers that be are no longer fulfilling their obligation. What do we do? What do we do here? Well, our obligation was to preserve. Okay. That's it. That's the best way to do that. What do we got? Deal with what's in front of us. Let's see. And as I bow, let's see, I do commit myself into the hands of vengeance or reward, karma, cause and effect, so that they may help my mighty and secret soul and the creator of my soul who works in silence and not the silence can express. It's all willingly. Everything you do in magic is willingly. Can't be forced into it. Doesn't work if you're forced. You know? Doesn't matter. You know, it's like you could do anything. Anything you're forced to do has no real, what we would say, binding karmic content on you. Unless you let it. Okay? That's, you know, about, you know, soldiers that get drafted. You know, why most of them didn't fire their guns. They hide out because they don't want to be there. The average rifle company in World War II was, American Rifle Company was deadly. I mean, it only had like a, I think an 80% fire rate, maybe 90. That means like 8 or 9 out of the guys, or no, I mean less than that, a 10 or 20% fire rate. 80 or 90% of the guys were hiding. As well they should, because they didn't want to be there. They wanted to go and get it, and if they did, it was just to get it over with and to go home. You know? So there's no, you know, who bears the burden of those actions? Well, they do to some degree, but so does the entire country and people and political structures that put them in that place. You know, same thing. This you know, what you don't do. You see, the emotional content is what creates the karmic action. Remember, cause and effect. That's what really creates the action, or the attachment, is what is the emotional content that's behind it. You know? Most of the soldiers I've talked to, they didn't really feel any hatred towards their enemy. They just wanted to be over with. Which is strange, because, you know, when you see like training in the 60s and 70s changed, particularly in the Vietnam period, to create a sense of real hatred and enjoyment of the act of killing. The songs, the marching tunes were all around that. That was a psychological brainwashing. Hey, this is something that you do, this is good to do, and you should enjoy it. And of course, we're going to give you an unlimited supply of tobacco, alcohol, drugs, and prostitutes to keep you happy while you're doing it. You know. So that's different. That's a whole different ballgame. That's why it produced a different kind of veteran. You know, for a lot of reasons. You know, how is the person treated? How are they encouraged? And we see that all the time. Pick anything that you study or do, and you see that you don't. You know, how do we encourage people to do things that they don't want to do with a carrot or a stick? How do we? What is the karmic connections to that? What are the things you're truly committed to? You know, and then going to using that same thing. That's why, you know, the American military now, it's all volunteer. So it's extremely professionalized, as are almost all of them in the Western world, because people make a choice. Hey, I want to do this. I kind of understand. Maybe they don't fully understand. But they have a pretty good idea now what's going on, what they're getting into, and what's expected of them. So that's a different karmic obligation. But it also is a different shift for the countries involved and that support them too. So it's very complex in that regard. But it all comes down to choice. You know, are you congruent in the action? Now, as we go through the different grades, we'll be done shortly, guys. As we go through the different grades, we get another vow. And this is one that has a whole different meaning. And I want you to pay close attention to this. And this was taken from the vow of the Ademptus Exemptus, which is attributed to the sphere of Hesed. And I think this was Crowley's version. The obligation, of course, of the adept at this point, because you're considered an adept, someone who has skill and knowledge, you know, is to prepare some kind of written testament of your experience for the assistance of others. This, and of course, will attain different powers and abilities through meditation. But more importantly, what I like is that it says, I, and it gives the mystical name, again, I affirm, a member of the body of God. See, before you were just, you know, a member of the group. Now you're saying, I am a member of the body of God. Reintegrated. You know, reintegration into the whole. Osiris is re-put together. The Adam Kadmon that fell apart is now reconstituted. My light has been reintegrated into this. Okay? Bind myself, again, freely, on behalf of the whole universe. This isn't for me alone, but this is for the whole of the cosmos, visible and invisible. Even as we are now physically bound onto the cross of suffering, which is life itself. Life is suffering. We like to admit it or not. Okay? And I will lead a pure life as a devout servant of the order, whatever that order is, that group. And I will understand all things. I will love all things. I will perform all things and endure all things. Unwavering. You are not discouraged. Okay? I will continue in the knowledge and conversation of my holy guardian angel. And I will work without attachment. Remember, I'll just do my duty. I'll do what I have to do. And what comes of it, comes of it. The greatest problem is people look for reward in everything they do. I mean, we shouldn't be sloppy. We have to have certain outcomes that we expect. But it's about the attachment to the outcome. I didn't get exactly what I wanted. And then you get, you know, it's like a child that throws a tantrum. You know, I know, you go to work, you're trying to work on a song, it doesn't quite work out. You know, it gets irritating, you walk away, you're working on a batch of chocolate, it didn't work out. You know, maybe you learned something from it. Hell, maybe you sell it on the cheap and cut your losses. I don't know, or you can reconstitute it. We all
salvage almost everything.
Yeah, we have that happen where, you know, we're doing something that doesn't work out, but we have to be detached and say, well, what can I learn from that and move on rather than get hung up on it. And that's the attachment to results. That attachment not only is what often very causes our problems, okay, or it takes something which was wonderful and turns it into a problem. Okay? So we work without attachment. And I will work for truth. Truth. Remember, initiation is truth. It's a de facto truth. And I will rely only upon myself. I rely upon myself. And I will interpret every phenomena as a particular dealing of God with my soul. Remember how I said earlier, how you perceive me and those around you affects how you perceive these teachings? Okay? We begin to look at everything in that microcosmic, macrocosmic way, that everything is a reflection of the universe somehow teaching me something if I perceive it. I rely only upon myself. That doesn't mean we isolate ourselves, but that we make full use of our faculties. I remember one Lama I was listening to, and he was a very nice fellow, and he was talking about it. He said, look, this is the way it's done. You know, you have something which you have to do. You know what it is. You do it, and you rely upon yourself to get it done as if no one else can. And that's what you do. And how often are you told that? Yeah, your old man, yeah, your old man tells you.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, but that's it, you know? And then, you know, what will happen if one fails? And then also what happens if it succeeds? Okay, and all this I do swear and seal. And he goes with a stroke of a bell, which is the sound going out to the cosmos. So you see different oaths and obligations at different points in your journey. But if you start out with that earlier, that one in the beginning, or the second one that I read to you, as your opening view, you begin working from that point. You begin working from that de facto point of everything is okay. Everything is something here for me to learn. So everything here is something that I can be detached from and use. Not take it personal. It's not personal. Everyone dies. It's not personal. You know, it's not personal. We steal from everybody. You know, it's that way. You know, you begin to create more space for yourself. And that sphere in particular is about creating space. So when we deal with the elements, again, that last one, when you're breathing it in, creating openness and space is what creates possibilities. Widens that for the plethora to push out more and more of the elements. Now, that is pretty much all I have to say for you today. It is 4 minutes to 5. I hope that this was worth your journey. I hope that you found it of value. You can email me if you have any questions. We'll be having the recording available at some point and the written notes, which are extremely extensive. I encourage you to undertake these practices that we talked about regularly. Those of you who have not done the alchemical work, get to it. They'll help you very much. Those of you who have not done the work with the seals, I would encourage you to do it, or at least begin working with me on a way to work with those seals particular to this work. Okay, if you can't do the whole 1 year practice. And those of you who have done the 1 year practice, I'd like to talk to you maybe by email or Skype or something as a group, some way to use these seals on some particular functions for yourselves, you know, that you want to work with, so we can begin to see some more practical results from this.
Say you can use it for healing aspects.
Right. Let's begin working with this, because this is a wonderfully underutilized aspect of magic. I have to tell you that. Very few schools work with it. That's why very few people have done that work that you did for the year. And it's not enough alone for me to work on my own experience. I need to hear from others to see where do they line up and where do they don't. And
One thing I want to mention, when I was in Israel, I bought an art piece. There's an artist there. There's a lot of Kabbalistic art. This one woman particularly does it. She does this one painting of the 72 angel names. And it's, you can use it for gazing or whatever you want. I can send you the image so you can.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah. The art
It's
piece.
amazing.
I have them right here. I can show you some.
Okay, good.
But just really amazing stuff she does.
Is she the one that illustrates Rabbi Ashlar's stuff?
No, all her stuff is done in Hebrew letters. She does the tree of life and stuff like that.
Okay.
But it's like three-dimensional. She used like golden glitter and with light and everything. It's pretty amazing stuff.
Well, the way they used to do it is, they would, you would get the meditations, and you would meditate on the names. And then from the names would arise images and symbols. And you would write those down. And that's how the doctrine of correspondences became codified. And that's why you also see differences from one school to the next. But people began thinking that these things are incredibly concrete, and they're not. They're quality, but they have a wide range of potential.
Because everybody has their different aspects of where they ever came from.
Right.
I've noticed that you have to really pick something that you want to go with, I think.
Well, even I tell a lot of folks, for example, I said severity is on the right and mercy's on the left. And I said, well, yeah, but not in traditional Kabbalah, not from Jewish Kabbalah. It's reversed. I said, well, what do you mean? I said, well, it's reversed. So, well, what does that do? I said, it doesn't mean anything. You just, like I said, for example, if I'm doing a particular work, for public work, I always go with this stuff where it's right and left. But there may be some private work that I need to do where I need to reverse that for one reason. It's just like I mentioned to you, like in the channels in Vajrayana, The channels in men and women are often reversed. But the way I learned one system of work, who was considered one of the highest masters in Vajrayana, he said, it doesn't matter. He said, you don't need to reverse. Just do this work. Just do it. Don't worry about it.
Do it than get caught up in something.
Yeah, he said, just do this practice. Don't worry about, and that's it. And the same thing with the colors. It's very easy to get caught up in, you have to, you pick it and you work it.
It's called analysis paralysis.
Yeah, analysis paralysis.
That's right. Analysis paralysis. Right.
See, and here's the story that I wanted to tell you. It all comes down to the dog's tooth. Now, do you know the story of the dog's tooth?
No, I don't.
No.
Is this related to the crow that you found?
I love my dead crow. I love my dead crow.
Can we
All
ask
the
you what you're
parts-
doing with it, or
all
is
the
that?
I have cut the wings and the tail off, and they are right now being desiccated in salt, sea salt, to draw everything out, any parasites, and to dry it out. And I have appropriately buried the remains next to, a very nice home.
The guinea pig.
Yes, I've given pigs. I've given it a very nice home. So, and a crow is a crow or a raven. The feathers are important for shamanic magic across all of Eurasia, and particularly in alchemy.
Wow.
So to find one, and I had said a week earlier, I need a crow's feathers, and I don't want to kill one. Geez, I hope I can find a dead one somewhere. And there it was, right on my way to go take pictures of a church. Dead crow right there.
Wow.
Must have flown right. It was fresh, so it must have broken its neck when it flew into the glass. Yeah.
Asking you shall
That's right. So now we're going to do that, you see, with a few other things. But the point is, there's this story that goes around. And we always tell you faith is everything. You have to have faith. That's why we say the part of building the ritual of, I do this in the name of, as he did. I do this in the name of the Lord, just as Moses parted the waters of the Red Sea to allow the children of Israel to escape the Egyptians. So do I part the barriers before me to allow myself to escape from the injustices. I just made that up, by the way. But that would be an example. Okay? That would be an example of the news. Just as Jesus raised the body of Lazarus from the tomb, so do I raise you from this deathbed and into light. As was done to the centurion's son, so do you. Okay. See the analogy?
You go through those books and they read them. Without working in a group, you really can't do much of what's in them. It is self that requires an interaction.
What, these groups? These
All
books?
ceremonial magic. All magic
This-
is not,
thi-
it can't be truly accomplished by yourself.
This is, what I'm telling you is that there is a way to do a solitary path, which we were just discussing. It is a path of the hermit. It can be done. It can be done if you have the proper links and connections to people who can help you, often in a very linear one-to-one or small group format as this. It can be done. And that is what we're working on now. But as I was saying to you, the nature of all this is to build confidence and faith. You're reminding yourself that this has been done, this is going to be done now, and it will be done in the future.
And that's the dog's tooth.
And the dog's tooth is a story of, there was a mother who used to say to her son, as he went to get stuff in India, she said, bring me back a relic of the Buddha. And she said, finally, he's going and traveling and he fails. She goes, if you don't bring me a relic of the Buddha, next time you come back, I'm going to kill myself. He says, oh. He goes, he's traveling back, and he says, oh, I forgot a relic. What am I going to do? And he finds a dead dog by the side of the road, and he takes out one of its teeth. He wraps it up in a prayer cloth, and he hands it to his mother. And his mother is devoted to it, puts it on her altar, says prayers all the time, and achieves a high degree of illumination. Now, it was her faith. And the same goes with the names. There's stories of how, Lama goes, sees his mother's praying. He says, Mom, he's approaching the house, he sees the names illuminated above the house, and everything is brilliant and bright. And he tells her, you're saying the prayers wrong, because, she couldn't read or write. So, of course, and often they're in Sanskrit, and the Tibetans are lousy with Sanskrit, okay? So, she changes her prayers, he sees that it's not as bright as it used to be, and he tells her to change back. Because it's the faith. If you don't believe in the method, it won't work. And on a more graphic point, I remember a story of a fun guy. He was same thing, in day-to-day life. He was a British commando. He was telling a story about a guy that got kicked out of his unit with a broken arm. And the reason he got a broken arm is because he was saying something about some techniques which are a little complicated, a little difficult, which is kind of rare. But the commander called him in, and he said, said to go through the maneuver. He broke his arm in the process and threw him out. And he said, why do you throw him out? Because you don't believe in the methods we're teaching you. If you don't believe in it, you're going to get yourself and everyone else killed.
Well, it's like a sports team. If you're not buying into how the coach is teaching.
Yeah, you got to find another coach or another team.
Right.
This is very much because it is so energy driven, and energy is emotions, and energy is commitment. You're in or you're out.
That's
But-
why you said when you, the book, stick with that
Yeah,
Methodology.
methodology.
the whole way through.
Till you've exhausted it. You may exhaust it in 3 months, you may exhaust it in 3 years. Doesn't matter. You'll know when it's time. But you really do have to exhaust it, not just, it's time to move on now. You see, that jumping around is just a way of never achieving anything.
Energy.
So is eclecticism. A little here, a little there, a little there. You don't know what you're mixing. If you are not, let's put it this way, if you are not a master chef, how do you know what to mix? I wouldn't even get near his kitchen. And he'd be a fool if he let me near it.
That's for after you master
And
it.
it's, yeah. Only after you have a very strong understanding are you then able to begin to say, okay, I know, I get an idea. There's a lot of guys out there that got black belts, first degree, and brown belts, and this, and a whole wide range of things. But they'll still get their hats handed to them
Not really good at one thing.
by someone who just stayed with one thing.
Like boxing.
We got for a good boxer, I'll hand their hat to them.
Carve them all up.
Good, yeah. We had a guy around here who's famous. I told you about him. He's famous because he fought Chuck Norris. And everyone always said, well, how long did you last? It was like, I think 3 minutes or something like that. Like, 3 minutes? You don't understand. He fought Chuck Norris.
Yeah.
Do you understand what that meant? He got to that point.
Yeah, exactly.
Where he was actually in the ring with, that guy. Everybody loves him too because he's just a nice guy. He doesn't have anything to prove. We showed a guy, he's hard as a rock. He has nothing to prove to anybody. But if you want to prove yourself at your own expense, he may oblige you. Unlike these other guys who got something to prove, It's the same way, it's at what level did you get? I said, wow, that's great. This is the guy who was in the movie with Bruce Lee. This is like, it's all perspective, isn't it?
Yeah.
And to me, I'm looking at this guy saying, well, he's really got a lot going for him. His students are nice too. At least when I met them, they were all very polite, Great. So, you learn a lot by not only the person, but by their students. And again, do they stay focused on something and stick to it?
Oh.